September 1940. Filton Aerodrome, Bristol. The morning air carries the flat scent of oil and primer. Across the concrete apron, engineers in heavy coats move between rows of dark, unfinished aircraft. The hangars echo with the sound of rivet hammers, a syncopated rhythm beneath the distant drone of patrol bombers returning from night operations. Under the grey canvas of an overcast sky, one aircraft stands apart. Its proportions look wrong, a short, broad fuselage, twin engines too large for its narrow wings. The name chalked on its nose reads simply, Beaufighter. Technicians cluster around it with clipboards and stopwatches. A flight sergeant calls for silence. The two Bristol Hercules engines cough once, twice, then catch, filling the airfield with a deep, uneven growl. The noise reverberates through the hangars like thunder rolling in metal walls. Observers describe the machine as brutal and inelegant. Its nose houses for 20mm Hispano cannon, aligned perfectly along the center line. Beneath the wings, there are fittings for machine guns and rockets, experimental equipment not yet standardized. Its paint is still primer gray, the roundels barely visible beneath grime and overspray. An RAF test pilot climbs aboard, fastening his harness as the ground crew clears the area. There is no ceremony. No press, no inspection. Only a few officers from the Ministry of Aircraft Production stand near the control tower, watching through field glasses. They speak quietly among themselves. The aircraft silhouette, squat and aggressive, contrasts sharply with the sleek Spitfires parked nearby. At 10:07 hours, the Beaufighter begins its first low-altitude trial. It lifts from the runway after only a few hundred yards, heavy but stable. Onlookers note the absence of vibration, unusual for a twin-engine aircraft of this size. Its thick wings generate unexpected lift, and its hydraulic controls respond faster than expected. By 10:19, it disappears into cloud over the Bristol Channel. Engineers record every second of flight on a stopwatch. Inside the cockpit, the pilot feels the frame tremble as he pushes the throttles forward. The Hercules engines deliver 1,400 horsepower each, forcing the aircraft toward 300 miles per hour, faster than any existing RAF night fighter. Over the Severn estuary, the Beaufighter banks hard. Its tailplane remains rigid, the airframe holding firm under stress. The onboard instruments show no flutter. The test log later reads, stable in dive. Excellent roll response. Heavy on elevator. When the aircraft lands, the pilot climbs out and removes his goggles. He gives a short nod. That is all. The engineers resume work immediately, tightening bolts, checking oil lines, noting temperature fluctuations from the engines. The design's lineage is clear. It borrows the wings and tail of the Beaufort torpedo bomber, repurposed for night interception. A wartime shortcut born from urgency. The RAF has no time for elegance. Britain is under nightly attack. The Luftwaffe's bombers cross the channel in waves, and radar stations can track them but not stop them. The twin-seat Blenheims are too slow, the Hurricanes too short-ranged. The Air Ministry orders a fast, heavily armed fighter that can operate in the dark. The Beaufighter's engineers, led by Leslie Fry's and L.G. Fry's team at the Bristol Aeroplane Company, work without pause. They strip weight where possible, reinforce the fuselage with duralumin ribs, and mount radar sets in the nose once available. The aircraft's thick frame can absorb the additional weight without losing performance. At Filton, the prototype taxis back to its hangar. Technicians measure engine wear. The smell of burned castor oil lingers in the air. Outside, a clerk stamps the test sheet with the code R2052, the first of its type. In the official report to the ministry, one sentence stands out. Despite appearance, performance exceeds expectations. may serve as night interceptor with immediate effect. No one notices how significant that line will become. Within a year, this awkward machine, built from spare parts and desperation, will earn a new reputation across occupied Europe. For now, it is only another test flight, logged in a grey folder under the heading Bristol Type 156. The noise of its engines fades across the field, and the hangar doors close with a metallic clang. The Beaufighter's shadow falls across the tarmac, broad, short, and unmistakably powerful. By late 1940, the Bristol Beaufighter enters operational testing with No. 29 Squadron at RAF Turnhill. The base sits in cold autumn fog, its runways lit by narrow floodlamps. The aircraft line forms in silence, a row of twin-engine silhouettes against the mist. Crews move quietly, fitting ammunition belts into the wing bays and checking the 4 Hispano cannon mounted beneath the nose. A radar truck idles beside the hangar, its operator aligning the antenna. The new AIMK for set is crude, its green screen showing faint arcs of light. It detects bombers only a few miles ahead, often lost again in interference. Still, it is the only system capable of guiding a fighter through darkness. The Beaufighter's size allows it to carry both the radar unit and the power supply, something no single-engine aircraft can manage. At 22:43 hours, Flight Lieutenant John Cunningham takes off with radar operator Jimmy Rawnsley. Their mission is simple: intercept a Heinkel He-111 formation approaching from the North Sea. The engines roar into the night, the vibration steady through the fuselage. Inside the cockpit, the instrument panel glows a dim red. Cunningham scans the darkness through the windscreen, while Rawnsley tracks faint echoes on the cathode display. Contact. Range for miles, closing, Rawnsley reports. Cunningham adjusts heading. The Beaufighter begins a shallow climb to 12,000 feet. The air is smooth and silent except for the steady pulse of the Hercules engines. The radio crackles once, ground control confirming the radar plot. Within minutes, the blip grows stronger. Rawnsley calls distance, 1 mile. Cunningham lowers the throttle, easing forward. The black outline of a bomber emerges against the faint moonlight, slow, steady, unaware. He squeezes the trigger. For cannon fire in unison, a white arc of tracers crossing the sky. The Heinkel's port engine bursts into flame. Its silhouette drops away into cloud. The intercept lasts less than 30 seconds. When Cunningham returns to base, his report is precise and unemotional: target destroyed. No damage sustained. Radar performance satisfactory. Ground crews count 120 spent shell casings scattered along the runway. The Beaufighter is rearmed within 20 minutes for another patrol. By January 1941, the aircraft proves its worth across multiple squadrons. Its heavy frame absorbs night turbulence that causes lighter fighters to drift. Mechanics note the robustness of its hydraulic system: fewer leaks, easier maintenance in freezing temperatures. The aircraft's long endurance, nearly 4 hours on internal fuel, allows patrols deep over the channel. Crews describe the cockpit as cramped but efficient. Instruments are grouped tightly, engine gauges aligned at eye level. The navigator's radar screen sits low on the right, connected by thick cables to the transmitter in the rear bay. Behind the seats, a small escape hatch is bolted shut for structural rigidity, a design choice that few question until much later. On the ground, technicians examine wreckage from the first successful interceptions. German bomber crews refer to a silent twin-gun monster. Intelligence intercepts record the code name Schweinhund, literally pig dog, used in Luftwaffe radio chatter to describe the unseen fighter striking from the dark. At Filton, production accelerates. The factory operates 3 shifts around the clock. Women assemble wing spars, while apprentices fit electrical conduits along the fuselage interior. The smell of varnish and fuel lingers throughout the assembly hall. Finished airframes roll onto flatbed trailers and are towed toward dispersal bays for engine fitting. Each machine receives a serial number, paint, and a brief inspection before transport to operational units. By spring, the Beaufighter's presence extends from the Shetlands to Malta. Coastal Command modifies it for long-range patrols, fitting extra fuel tanks and radar optimized for surface search. Crews begin attacking U-boats off the Bay of Biscay, strafing conning towers with cannon fire. Reports describe consistent accuracy and survivability. Aircraft return with bullet holes in wings and flak damage to nacelles, yet they remain flyable. One maintenance record from February 1942 notes, engine number 8237 sustained direct hit from 20mm shell. Aircraft returned safely. Pilot uninjured. In combat footage filmed by gun cameras, the Beaufighter's tracer lines are short and concentrated. Its recoil barely shifts the frame. The effect is mechanical, almost surgical. Observers compare it to a hammer blow delivered in perfect rhythm. By mid-1942, the Ministry of Aircraft Production recognizes the pattern. The Beaufighter, dismissed as ungainly, has become indispensable. It operates where no other fighter can, through cloud, darkness, and storm. Its silhouette, once mocked for its shape, now symbolizes precision and endurance. By late 1942, the Bristol Beaufighter's success is measurable in numbers, not speculation. Production records at the Ministry of Aircraft Production list more than 2,300 completed airframes, nearly double the estimate from its approval year. Factories in Filton, Weston-super-Mare, and Stockport operate at full capacity. Each completed aircraft takes 8,900 man-hours, less than half the requirement of a Mosquito or Blenheim. The use of existing Beaufort components shortens assembly by weeks. Operational data confirms reliability. Between November 1940 and September 1942, the mean time between engine failure in combat conditions is recorded at 138 flight hours, the highest among twin-engine RAF fighters. Airframe fatigue remains minimal. The duralumin spars show little stress even after extended night sorties. Squadron reports compile a pattern of efficiency. Number 600 Squadron records 24 confirmed kills in 31 missions. Number 68 Squadron reports interception rates above 70% when guided by radar. Flight data from Coastal Command indicates an average strike accuracy of 65% in anti-shipping rolls, remarkable for low-altitude attacks performed under heavy flak. Archival correspondence between Bristol's design chief Leslie Fries and Air Marshal Sir William Sholto Douglas reveals a quiet recognition of the aircraft's unique balance. "It is not the fastest, nor the most elegant," Fries wrote, "but it completes the task with certainty. That alone defines its worth." By 1943, the Beaufighter evolves through several marques. The Mk.VI carries the improved Hercules 6 engines with two-stage superchargers, raising top speed to 320 miles per hour. The Mk.X adds a dorsal fin extension for stability and modified rocket rails for surface strikes. Engineering notes show meticulous iteration, reinforced undercarriage mounts, revised exhaust manifolds to reduce glare during night firing, and improved de-icing systems for Arctic operations. At the same time, RAF intelligence compiles German responses. Intercepted Luftwaffe memos from the Night Fighter Command in Stade refer to repeated losses of bombers to a British twin with heavy forward armament. Post-action reports from Kilogram 26 and Kilogram 77 describe cannon fire so concentrated that single bursts disable entire engines. Pilots report no warning, only sudden flashes from the dark followed by structural failure. In statistical summaries prepared for Parliament, the Beaufighter is credited with destroying 1,000 enemy aircraft and more than 1,500 ships and submarines by war's end. It achieves this with fewer than 1,800 combat losses, one of the most favorable exchange ratios of the conflict. Yet, the aircraft remains under public radar. Wartime newsreels highlight Spitfires and Lancasters. The Beaufighter's missions occur mostly unseen, in darkness, at sea, or far from camera crews. A 1944 RAF public information memo describes it simply as a versatile two-seat night and strike aircraft. Nothing more. At Banff, Scotland, the Beaufighter squadrons form the Banff Strike Wing. Their targets, German shipping lanes off Norway. Gun camera film from January 1945 shows entire convoys torn apart by coordinated low-level attacks. Pilots describe treetop height approaches at 250 miles per hour, followed by salvos of rockets and cannon fire. Radar logs from Coastal Command confirm the effectiveness. Over 60% of Axis cargo traffic in Norwegian waters destroyed or abandoned between October 1944 and April 1945. Each sortie averages only 27 minutes from landfall to return. Production sheets mark the shift from quantity to refinement. Bristol's engineers standardize power-operated turrets and radar configurations for quick field maintenance. Unit costs drop to £25,000 per aircraft, one-third the price of a heavy bomber. Archival summaries from the Air Ministry in 1945 conclude: the Beaufighter fulfills all specifications not by innovation, but by adaptation. The reuse of Beaufort assemblies, combined with exceptional engine integration, resulted in the most economical heavy fighter design to date. In performance graphs appended to the report, a line stands out. Beaufighter, 330 miles per hour, Mk.VI, range 1,750 miles, payload 2,000 pounds, crew 2. Spitfire, 370 miles per hour, range 550 miles, payload 500 pounds, crew 1. The contrast is immediate and decisive. Speed mattered less than persistence. The Beaufighter's numbers demonstrate a simple wartime truth: efficiency can be deadlier than elegance. By late 1943, even Luftwaffe command recognizes the shift. German bomber crews begin altering routes, avoiding coastal paths known to be patrolled by the heavy twin. In one captured logbook from a downed Ju-88 crew, an entry reads, "No escape if the twin finds you." For the engineers at Bristol, the realization is quiet but complete. What began as a recycled bomber project has become the defining symbol of Britain's industrial pragmatism, a machine that proves beauty and survival have nothing in common. May 1945. Banff Airfield, northeast Scotland. The war in Europe is ending. Rows of Bristol Beaufighters stand silent, their engines cooling for the last time. Ground crews move between them with empty logbooks, recording hours flown and rounds expended. The sound of tools and distant gulls replaces the roar of night operations that once shook the hangars. Most of the aircraft bear scars. Dented panels, patched holes, faded paint. Under the wings, the mounts for rockets and torpedoes are scratched from hundreds of launches. On the tail of one, the stenciled serial NE829 is barely visible beneath layers of salt corrosion, a veteran of more than 80 missions over the Norwegian coast. In the operations hut, officers complete the final performance reports. The totals are stark: over 5,900 Beaufighters built, deployed to 25 squadrons worldwide. Operational loss rate, 3.8% per sortie. Confirmed victories, 1,168 enemy aircraft, 1,512 vessels sunk or disabled. The summaries leave no commentary, only figures and initials. At the Imperial War Museum, post-war analysis papers echo a recurring assessment: the Beaufighter represented the practical extreme of wartime design, where function eliminated ornament. It had no maneuverable grace, no reputation for beauty. but the pilots who flew it described something else entirely, a machine that always came home. Wing Commander John Cunningham later recalled during a 1946 interview, "It was heavy, it was loud, but it never failed you. When you pulled the trigger, it worked." His radar operator, Jimmy Rawnsley, adds in his memoir Night Fighter, "It looked like a bulldog and flew like one. That was all you needed in the dark." Post-war engineers examining recovered aircraft note the simplicity of its systems. Hydraulic lines were accessible. Engine mounts detachable within hours. The radar bay, originally improvised, became a template for modular avionics bays used in later fighters. In technical seminars during 1946–47, these features were cited as examples of combat maintainability, later influencing the design of early jet aircraft such as the Gloucester Meteor and de Havilland Venom. At Bristol Aeroplane Company, production lines shift toward civilian designs. Yet within their archives, blueprints for the Beaufighter remain annotated with post-war remarks, future adaptable airframe, good example of reuse engineering. The phrase reappears in Royal Aircraft Establishment reports throughout the early Cold War, a direct acknowledgement of the Beaufighter's lasting industrial legacy. In Australia, the aircraft continues to serve. The Royal Australian Air Force operates locally assembled Beaufighters in the Pacific Theatre until 1949. Their missions over Borneo and the Philippines leave similar impressions: low-level strikes, unbreakable reliability. Maintenance logs from RAF Base Coomaley Creek list dozens of sorties with minimal downtime. Photographs from those years show crews posing beside their aircraft, sweat-streaked, smiling, and visibly exhausted. Behind them, the Beaufighter's bulky frame fills the background, a silent proof of endurance. When compared to contemporaries, its impact becomes clearer. The de Havilland Mosquito captured headlines for speed, the Beaufighter earned none, yet outlasted it in service by nearly a decade. The Mosquito demanded specialist woodworking skills and delicate assembly. The Beaufighter needed only rivets, metal, and labor. In post-war procurement discussions, the Air Ministry cited the aircraft's success to justify future doctrines favoring modularity and simplicity. A 1948 internal memorandum notes, "Combat experience demonstrates that maintainability and adaptability outweigh aerodynamic perfection." The concept echoes into the next generation of designs, the English Electric Canberra, the early Hawker Hunter, and even naval strike aircraft that adopted the Beaufighter's cockpit layout and armament philosophy. Its legacy lives less in its name than in its structure: strong, practical, efficient. By 1950, most surviving airframes are scrapped. A few are preserved, one at Hendon, another at the RAF Museum Cosford. Visitors often remark on its size, its blunt nose, its utilitarian shape. Few realize that this fugly aircraft, built from necessity, quietly defined post-war air combat thinking. A 1951 engineering journal summarizing Britain's wartime aircraft concludes with a single line beneath its photograph: "Proof that survival favors the efficient, not the elegant." The Beaufighter's story ends without ceremony, no parades, no final sortie. Only a silent airfield, a few men walking between machines that once turned the tide of the night war. Its shadow, cast across 2 decades of aviation, remains wide, durable, and unmistakable. Farnborough Aeronautical Establishment. Rows of dismantled Beaufighter components lie on long wooden benches. Engineers in white coats take measurements with calipers, noting fatigue lines on the fuselage joints and wing spars. The war is over, but its machines are still teaching lessons. The Royal Aircraft Establishment has begun a systematic post-mortem of every major RAF type. The Beaufighter's frame surprises the inspectors. Despite years of rough use, its stress fractures are minimal. Wing load distribution tests confirm an unusually high tolerance margin, nearly 25% beyond its rated limits. The rivet lines show no distortion, even after extended low-level operations. On the report's first page, an engineer writes, "Built to endure, not impress." The Air Ministry uses these findings to shape post-war doctrine. Memos circulate through the Design and Development Directorate stressing practical survivability over aesthetic refinement. The Beaufighter becomes a case study in modularity. Its reuse of Beaufort bomber components is cited as an example of industrial elasticity, the ability to adapt existing tooling for new combat requirements. That idea soon translates into policy. The 1947 Economic Airframe Directive calls for reconfigurable platforms, a principle later visible in the Gloucester Meteor's interchangeable engine bays and the Canberra's simplified maintenance layout. In briefings to Parliament, Air Chief Marshal Sir Wilfrid Freeman remarks, "The Beaufighter proved that victory comes not from novelty, but from the intelligent reuse of the known." Across the Atlantic, American engineers studying captured British aircraft echo similar conclusions. At Wright Field in Ohio, a technical intelligence report lists the Beaufighter among the 3 most structurally instructive designs of the war, alongside the Mosquito and the P-Air-47 Thunderbolt. Analysts highlight its wide center of gravity tolerance, a feature that allowed radar, rockets, and torpedoes to be fitted without major redesigns. This adaptability inspires several post-war prototypes. The de Havilland Sea Venom adopts the Beaufighter's 2-seat configuration for radar operations. The Bristol Brigand, though plagued with mechanical issues, carries forward its cannon layout and ground attack philosophy. Even the American A-26 Invader borrows aspects of its strike doctrine, heavy firepower at moderate speed, reinforced for multiple roles. In 1948, an RAE engineering symposium presents a detailed comparison between wartime twin-engine fighters. The Beaufighter's durability factor ranks highest, its operational lifespan exceeding 1,200 flight hours per airframe. Its repair turnaround averages 48 hours, half that of comparable aircraft. The conclusion reads, "It demonstrated the combat value of standardized components and accessible systems. A principle indispensable for jet aircraft maintenance." Meanwhile, Bristol's own design bureau applies these lessons to the emerging jet age. The same engineers who drew the Beaufighter's lines now study axial flow turbines. They design the Bristol Type 167 Brabazon and later the Olympus engine, the same power plant that would drive the Avro Vulcan and eventually the Concorde. In every technical conference, references to the Beaufighter recur. It remains their touchstone for structural discipline and pragmatic design. The Beaufighter's design philosophy also influences naval aviation. Royal Navy engineers note its ability to land and take off from short airstrips and rough fields, leading to experiments with stronger landing gear and tricycle configurations in the early 1950s. This line of thinking contributes indirectly to the angled deck carrier doctrine, a shift toward accommodating heavy, fast, adaptable aircraft. In military archives, training manuals continue to cite the Beaufighter in lessons on weapons integration. Its synchronized cannon mount and recoil absorption systems become early references for designing nose-mounted armaments on jets. By the mid-1950s, almost none remain in service. Yet in classrooms and factories, its blueprint still guides the young engineers now shaping Britain's post-war fleet. At the Royal Aircraft Establishment, one internal review ends with a line underlined in pencil. The Beaufighter stands as proof that utility, when refined to its purest form, achieves its own kind of beauty. The aircraft once mocked as ungainly becomes the quiet foundation of an entire generation's engineering logic. It changes how the RAF defines excellence, not through symmetry or speed, but through survival, simplicity, and system-level thought. Hendon Aerodrome, North London. A former RAF technician walks slowly beneath the vaulted ceiling of a new exhibition hall. The air smells faintly of oil and dust. In the center of the floor, surrounded by polished barriers, sits a restored Bristol Beaufighter TF.X, one of the few that survived the scrapyard. Its paint is a flat, weathered grey-green. The 4 Hispano cannons still protrude from its nose, dark and cold. Visitors pass without lingering long. Nearby, the sleeker Spitfire draws the crowds. A museum guide describes the Beaufighter as the workhorse of the night war. Most listeners nod politely and move on. But veterans who flew it stay longer, eyes tracing the heavy engine nacelles, the cockpit glass, the chipped propeller blades. They understand what the statistics never captured, the quiet dependability that held the line when glamour was elsewhere. In the decades after the war, historians begin to revisit the record. Air combat narratives, once dominated by the Spitfire and Lancaster, start to include the overlooked machines that filled the gaps. In 1968, the Journal of Aeronautical History publishes a retrospective titled The Functional Ideal, Lessons of the Beaufighter. The author, a former RAE analyst, writes, "It was neither fast nor elegant, yet its balance of firepower, range, and resilience created a new template, the strike fighter." This term, strike fighter, would later define an entire post-war class of aircraft, from the de Havilland Sea Vixen to the American A-10 Thunderbolt II. Each shared the same core idea, a heavily armed platform designed to survive hits and deliver precision force. The Beaufighter had done it first. Archival film footage resurfaces from coastal command squadrons, silent reels of aircraft skimming over Norwegian fjords, cannon flashing, spray exploding behind ships. Historians measure frame by frame the accuracy of the attacks. Even at 200 miles per hour, the convergence of all 4 cannon remains within a 20-foot pattern. The footage confirms what engineers always suspected: it was not brute force that defined the Beaufighter, but precision engineered under wartime pressure. By the 1970s, former pilots contribute memoirs and interviews to museums. Many describe the aircraft's personality in mechanical terms: its heavy controls, its trustworthiness, its refusal to quit. One writes, "It wasn't a machine you loved. It was a machine you depended on. And it never let you down." At the RAF Museum Cosford, curators restore another surviving example. During the process, they uncover original manufacturer stencils beneath the paint, Bristol Type 156 still visible under corrosion. The lettering becomes part of the display, a reminder that this machine began as an emergency improvisation, not a masterpiece. Engineers visiting decades later note the clarity of its design logic, short control linkages, accessible panels, and stress geometry that predates modern modular construction. In university aeronautics courses, the Beaufighter occasionally reappears in lectures on design under constraint, how necessity produces clarity. Public perception slowly changes. Documentaries from the 1980s and 1990s show it not as the ugly twin, but as the unsung solution to the chaos of 1940. Its form, once mocked, becomes the very image of wartime ingenuity, rough-edged, functional, unstoppable. Today, historians agree that its legacy endures less in the metal itself than in the philosophy it proved. That effectiveness lies not in beauty, but in coherence, the unity of engineering purpose from cockpit to tail. In the Imperial War Museum's post-war engineering archives, one closing line from a 1946 memo remains unedited in red pencil. The Beaufighter met every demand without redesign. Its success was industrial truth, not chance. The aircraft silhouette now stands as a visual paradox, awkward yet perfect, plain yet monumental. Its noise is gone, but its logic remains alive in every modern aircraft built to fight, endure, and return. As the museum lights dim, the Beaufighter rests under quiet illumination. Visitors who look long enough see what the engineers always did, not ugliness, but purpose made visible.